Okay, so this is part two of the Everyday Life Cluster 1 Geographical Skills. I'm adding this on as a follow up to the earlier section, which already dealt with some of the common questions. As I think there's been some more queries about what are the other possibilities. So I want to clarify first and foremost, like Ms. Chan always says, right? The possibilities are endless, right? So you have to understand that for this portion here, you need to deal with it logically. You need to deal with it with the situation that is given to you, like a data response question. It's just a longer data response question and requires you to deal with the tools that we talked about in the earlier section. Okay, whether they are looking at reliability testing, validity testing, or of the experiment that's being carried out, the investigation that's being carried out, is the data amount sufficient? Is the time amount sufficient? Are the tools that are used sufficient? So the tools that we already covered in the earlier videos, which if you have not watched, please go and watch that first. Okay, things like the sampling question, does it cover enough scope? Do you ask enough in your question itself, okay, your survey questions to cover to get the data that you want, okay? The type of sampling that is proposed, or rather the type of sampling that's actually suggested that they do, okay, or do they do even do any sampling at all? Is it completely convenient sampling, picking at the people who are the most convenient for the surveyor? Okay, location wise, that's the other thing that we already covered. So I think three to four additional questions I want to deal with today actually they look a bit different, but when you analyze it carefully, it is dealt with using the same set of information. You are still looking at what is given to you, and you're still doing the same analysis using this basic set of tools that we are looking at here. Okay, so we ended the other one, and let's move on to what the focus of this video is on. So this one gives a slightly different case study, right? They talk about this particular secondary school. They want to conduct an investigation to find out if this new housing project, okay, will affect the sense of place of the current residents in the neighborhood, right? So they craft a questionnaire, Google form. They give it to the first 100 people that walk past them. Okay, first 100 people that walk past them. So very straight off, right? If you look at it, what kind of sampling are they looking at when you're only asking the first 100 people that walk past? Right? So convenient sampling, right? Convenient sampling is what we are looking for, okay, or what they are looking for. But more importantly is this second part here, evaluate the reliability of the data collected. So what are some of these things that we can look at? Always remember when you're, like I mentioned earlier, right? If you're doing this question on validity evaluation, this is not OEQ. Okay, so how do you evaluate whether the thing is valid or the thing is reliable? You need to tell us based on what they have done, right? What is good and what is no good. Okay, so in terms of the tools that we looked at earlier on, so in terms of location, right? I don't have the insert here with me, but because they were located at the MRT station, okay, central location, people walk past, so they will get a good amount of people. Okay, next they had 100 participants, which is also a good sample size, right? A third thing is being on Google form, right? The convenience is there. Now these are not cast in stone. These are logical responses that you can think of when you're looking at this, and this is what is required. Okay, so I need to reinforce this. There is an endless amount of combinations of questions that can come out. So there's no real way they can prepare for all of these things. What can you prepare for? You can prepare for based on the tools, the analysis of the tools. What kind of sampling? Can you give a very, very brief description of the sampling types? Okay, later after the end of this, I'll revisit what I covered in the earlier video as well in terms of what are the very, very bare minimum things that you must be able to cite if you are comparing sampling types or you're suggesting sampling types. Okay, of course you cannot just say what is good lah, right? So there are also problems with what they have done, right? In terms of scope of data collection, right? Remember we started off this video by looking at the tools. What are the things that we can use to evaluate? One afternoon, is it enough? Okay, 10 close answer questions, is this really enough? Right, one afternoon, right? And then they're only at one location when you are looking at the whole neighborhood. What if people don't take the train? What if we are looking at the neighborhood actually, especially in this Chuan Park neighborhood where a lot of them are private homes, right? Private homes and condominiums. In this situation, then do everybody take public transport? Okay, when you look at people who live in private housing and condominiums, driving seems to be a very common form of transport. I wouldn't say everybody drives, but that's a common form, right? So that location, that one location, while it has a lot of through flow, are you then biased? Okay. So this is what we mean when you need to respond to a case scenario that's given to you. Okay, so this is I can't remember which school this is. It's either SIDA, Nanhua, or ACS, right? The other thing to note is if you're looking at samples, right? Please remember you need to look at the elect jog samples for this because the core jog ones have one full GI question, which is crafted in a very different manner, and so the responses need to be very very different from this. Okay, so you need to be sure if you're looking at past year papers that you're looking at the elective paper, right? Because the answering is a bit different. Next, right, this one looks at, okay, offhand you can see there are two tables, right? They're looking at popularity of botanic gardens, popularity, okay, among locals, especially seniors, right? So their hypothesis is popular with seniors, mainly for its orchid display, right? So what did they do? Count 3 gateways, 1 hour, 1 weekday. Okay, so as it is, you look at this, there are so many problems that we can talk about already. Right, then the table of data shows you at the gates, what do they have? Different gates, different type of distribution, right? You could count the total number. I think they didn't give us the total number here, but you could count the total number that's surveyed in totality here, right? Then they also survey 30 citizens, senior citizens, 10 at each gate to find out why they visited. This is probably to address your second part of the hypothesis, which is orchid display lah. Right? So over here, a Maya orchid display, this is probably important. This is you want to see a large number, then it would mean that yeah, the old people like to go and see the orchid display. So what is the question? And the question here asks you to use table, evaluate the validity of their hypothesis, right? So once again, valid, non-valid, okay, what is good, what is not good, right? Valid because they address the investigation question, whether there's a higher number at Botanic Gardens. Which part does address this? Actually, is this portion at the bottom here, table 1.2. Okay, next, they check by doing a count over specific time at all 3 gateways. This is also good because instead of just one, they do at all 3 gateways that is in the Botanic Garden. So good, good. Okay, right, not valid because part of the hypothesis is rejected because when you look at it, when you do numbers, you realize that the visitors, adults, right, senior citizens are 113. So there's a dissonance in the number here. Okay, when you look at the findings for interest, right, it is also arguable, right? So depending on how you want to present the data, once again, is completely data driven here, right? It can be taken as a valid or invalid point. Okay. Other things include things like other reasons, but this is not captured in this location here. May not be valid as the weekday. Okay, duration, timing, and duration, right? So this is not exactly suitable, right? Or maybe they should have done more days, more timing, longer hours. Okay, so if you look through this, right, these are both positive and negative. You have to remember, if you're doing an evaluative, you must tell us what they have done that is good, what they have done that is no good. Okay, this is not OEQ. I cannot stress this enough times. This is not OEQ. Okay, let's look at one more that is a bit more different, right? So this one here tells you the investigating this idea of sense of place in Hougang. So their hypothesis is the longer the residents stay, the more positive the opinion will be of Hougang. So what is the tool that they use? They use a close-ended questionnaire, right? There's very little other information given. Okay, they don't talk about how many respondents. They don't also talk about how they sample, right? These are all things that are not mentioned. Okay, so keep that in mind. But the data proves the data is pretty interesting to look at. So the question they give is how do you like living with right reasons, right? So in terms of 5 years and shorter, you have 50% who respond yes. As you get longer duration of stay, it increases, right? It increases again minimally but it still increases. And when you look at the final point, 16 years and longer, this is actually the highest percentage of yes. So what does yes mean then? So the second part of the table shows you what yes mean. Means they think there's more sentimental value, this is where nostalgia is, they grow up, right? They have family nearby, and it's pretty accessible. Okay, there's a lot of there's a lot of bus stops and MRTs in proximity. Right. So this is the reasoning. Then the reverse is for no, right? It's noisy, poor estate management, maintenance, insufficient food options, yeah, and then lack of greenery. So these are things that were collated by the group that's doing this survey. So then they want you to evaluate how well data supports the hypothesis. So we revisit the hypothesis before we look at data again. Hypothesis is this: the longer you stay, the more positive you are. Okay, so this is my hypo. Okay, so how do you process data then? Let's take a look at the first set of data. Okay, what does this data show? Based on this, does it support or does it not support? If you say it supports, give me the data set that shows it supports. Okay, the lowest years has increased to the maximum year. So do you need to give 4 quotations? Actually, no, but I will need to give the start and the end and 1 year in the middle, either 6 to 10 or 11 to 15, where it shows that it has been on an increasing trend. So this is very important. Increasing trend is very important. Okay, so what does the data show? Yes or no? Right, and then quote your support. Okay, basically 3 points. Next, the second part here, right? What does this actually indicate? Linked to the earlier data above, right? So actually, this group of people, the positive attitude for this is really largely sentimental. Okay, look at it; it's all feelings, 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 and then accessibility, lah. Right? But the problems seem to be very real problems. Okay, so does this indicate a link to the earlier data that's above? Yes. For the yes component, this shows what they like about Hougang. Okay, and that as you live longer, these are very very clear things that if you live longer, you'll be more sentimental. You live longer, you probably have grown up here. Okay, you live longer, your family members would probably be in the area as well, right? So what else can we talk about? We can talk about the no. Okay, the percentage of no here is given, is not given. You have to process it. So what can you do? If you look at this, means it's 50 no, 50-50, right? Then the other one would be 35 no. This one will be 30% no. And you move on, this will be 15% no. Okay, so look at it. What is the probability of people saying no? What are the problems with that they have cited that show that this also supports, right? Because these problems are things that you will notice more when you're new to the neighborhood. You notice the noise, you notice the construction, you will notice poor estate management before the positive thing comes in. Okay, so the points for this actually deal with largely the parts above. Okay, more on the first data set here, and linking the second data set, which is your longer answers, okay, or more the explanation to why they have selected yes and no. These links have to come in as well. Okay. Okay, I think this is the final one I want to go through. Once again, it's a bit different. So they told you they want to investigate relationship between number of amenities and elderly visitors at nature park. So they divide themselves. Okay, so this is good. They talk about how they conduct this, right? Divide themselves into groups and select 3 nature parks, conduct their questionnaire to 20 visitors on the weekend. So totality, right? Totality, you're looking at 60 respondents total. Okay, so keep this in mind. This is a decent size, although we're looking at 100 to be more representative. Okay, and the hypothesis they have here is if your nature park has more amenities, you will attract more elderly visitors. So this is my hypothesis. Okay, so they want you to identify a sampling method that you use for this and describe how it can be used. 3 marks only. So any details on the sampling that they're doing, right? They don't mention any details, so you can choose whichever type you can remember, right? So like I mentioned in the earlier video and in the earlier parts of this slide, right? Convenience, okay, you can look at either probability, non-probability, Non-probability, which means that it is really very random, there are biases that are built in, or you can choose something that is really, really good and would probably be able to represent. Okay, so the two types you can talk about, either one will do because it's only worth 3 marks. Is identify that they can either use a non-probability one, convenience, or they can use a probability one, random. Okay, couple of details about how you can actually conduct this, or details about how this type of sampling is done, provided earlier on in the slides. Okay, so let's look at the portion then. Let's go up and we take a look at the portions that deal with this. So like in the previous video when we looked at this, right, there are two main types of sampling. Okay, there are two main types of sampling we're looking at here, right? Probably non-probability. Okay, one will be better but more tedious. The other one would be easier but less accurate. Simple random is the more recommended form of probability. What must you tell them? Right, that you use a random number generator. Okay, random number generator, right, to select the samples. This is important. Okay, right? You can also do stratified if you want, but I will just stick to this. Okay. Next, convenience. Convenience ad hoc is the easiest, most accessible. Right? What is the problem with this? Of course, high risk of sampling bias. Right? So how do you do this? You just sample the people who walk past you immediately. The first, however, number you are looking for. So in our question earlier, it was 20, right? So you are just sampling the first 20 people who walk past you. Okay, to obtain their responses to the survey questions. Okay, so I will stop here before I ramble on and on and on. I just want you to remember that this particular type of skill-based questions, if you encounter them, they can really come in any form or structure. The tools that you're working with, very, very, very basically are the things that we talked about earlier. Okay, this set of tools, right? Are you looking at time frame? Are you looking at data? Are you looking at surveying question type, sampling type? Are you looking at the location? These are the three general areas that you will be critiquing it on. So whatever the scenario presentation looks like, come back to these three things. Think about the tools and how you can evaluate what the scenario is based on these tools. There is an unlimited amount of variations that can appear. So if you think that you can do enough exercise to cover all of them, I can tell you straight away you're wrong. It's not possible, right? Because this can be tested in a whole range of variations of scenarios. So this is a scenario based test, but your tools are the same. Okay, so work on the survey questions that is used. Is it enough to cover scope? Work on the sampling type that is used. Is it enough? Work on the location that is selected. Is it enough? Whichever one is given in the context, you work on what is given. Okay, you attack, you critique. Okay, let's not say attack. You critique it, and you work around that as your answer. Right? So yep. So I will end here for this part two of our geographical skills final prep.